Next to me is the Lotus Evora 400. Its name comes from the combination of the words evolution, vogue, and aura, giving you a little hint into what the Evora is like to drive. It's great looking, it's lightweight, it's got a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and it is a racing-inspired sports car for the road. What does the Evora 400 actually like to drive? Well, today we're gonna find out exactly that. I'm particularly excited to drive this Evora because I've never actually driven a Lotus before. They're known for their incredible handling and performance, but I'd like to see if the hype is real. I love the design philosophy. Lotus was founded more than 70 years ago by Colin Chapman with the principle adding horsepower makes cars faster on the straight, but subtracting weight makes cars faster everywhere. And this Lotus is no exception. It weighs just 3,000 pounds. It's a very small car too when you stand next to it. It's actually 12 inches shorter in length than a BMW M4. The roofline is also 6 inches lower to the ground than a BMW M4 as well. Well, I'm sure the Elise was incredibly fun to drive. I wasn't a huge fan of the way it looked. It seemed a bit feminine, especially when people would add those eyelashes to the headlights. Please don't do that. But the Evora, simply beautiful. Part of the key to keeping the Lotus lightweight is its use of a bonded extruded aluminum chassis. It's free from any welds. When you weld aluminum, it significantly reduces the torsional rigidity of the aluminum, meaning you have to use more material. And because the chassis is so stiff, that means the suspension is able to work more effectively as well. Speaking of suspension, it's got double wishbone suspension in front and rear. It's got Eibach springs and Bilstein dampers. The side profile of the Evora is absolutely stunning. Up front, we've got 19-inch wheels. In the back, we've got 20s. They ride on Michelin Pilot Super Sport tires for extra grip. They measure 235 millimeters in the front and 285s in the back. For brakes, we've got two-piece cross-drilled and ventilated rotors with AP racing calipers, and they stop the car extraordinarily well. Around back, we've got a uniquely designed three-piece rear wing that looks really cool. Now beneath that, we've got split LED taillights that look very Italian for a British car, but I love the way they look. Down lower, we've got a beefy rear diffuser, and in the center, a massive single exit exhaust. Let's hear how it sounds, shall we? The Lotus Evora actually has a decent amount of storage space in the trunk. In order to open it, we've got the key here. Now, to lock the Lotus, there is a little Lotus insignia. There's no markings on the key whatsoever. Below that is a blank button to unlock the car. And then to pop the trunk, you double tap on the button below that, which is also unlabeled. Go ahead and do that to reveal the trunk. Now, because of the shape of the trunk, it's very long this way, it's actually very practical. I was able to store my tripod, my slider, all of my camera equipment. The same cannot be said for the likes of most Porsches, Lamborghinis, and McLarens. And that's not the extent of the storage capacity as well, which you'll see in a minute. Now on to the good stuff, the engine. Now, unless you are super familiar with Lotus, I kind of doubt you know which manufacturer actually produces Lotus's engine. Take a guess. Well, it's Toyota. It's actually got the same 3.5-liter V6 that comes in a Toyota Camry. That's right, a mid-engine sports car with a Toyota Camry V6. Now, like a Camry, this engine is very reliable. Now, unlike a Camry, it's got an Edelbrock supercharger attached to it, which is good for 400 horsepower and 302 pound-feet of torque. And because it's a Toyota engine, that means parts are readily available and they're cheap. Now, on the inside of the Lotus, you'll notice something incredibly surprising for such a tiny car. It's actually got rear seats. Now, as much as I wanted to try and climb back there and show you guys how much space there was, I legitimately can't fit. These are the tiniest rear seats I have ever seen. Now, there are some benefits to having these rear seats. One, you can put your kids back there. Full-size adults will not fit. But two, you can use it for tons of extra storage room, which is what likely the majority of Lotus owners will do. All right, let's get all of the negatives of the Lotus Evora 400 out of the way right now. And they really only pertain to the interior. Now, these seats are comfortable and supportive. They're made of nice leather. I like the contrasted stitching. I really like the embossed logo in the headrest. But for me at 5'11", this headrest that's built into the seat hits me in the wrong part of my neck when I'm relaxed driving. So for spirited driving, when my neck and head are off the seat back, it's not a problem whatsoever. But if I rest my head back, this bulge here hits me at just the wrong spot in the back of my neck. Not really a huge fan of that. The vents for the climate control look kind of like a Ford Mustang, kind of cheap plastic as well. A lot of the switchgear feels just a little bit cheaper than you'd expect from a nearly $100,000 car. We do have nice leather everywhere, and I like the way it's laid out. It's very driver focused, but the fit and finish is not what you'd expect normally from a $100,000 vehicle. That being said, this is all about the driving experience, and once you drive it, you forget about all that, and none of that really matters. I figured, though, it would be worth mentioning. I'm also not a huge fan of the shape of the mirrors. They feel a little bit kind of sedan Camry-like and not sports car, supercar-like. Also, the infotainment screen looks rather aftermarket. It basically looks like you just took an Alpine unit and stuck it in there, which is possibly exactly what they did. And the backup camera graphics are pretty lousy. I do, however, love the steering wheel. The shape is rather unique. It has bulges in all these strange places, but it feels so nice in your hands. And the turning indicators as well as the windshield wipers are far enough away from the steering wheel so they're not in the way whatsoever. It's adjustable and height and telescoping. Just feels awesome in your hand. Then, of course, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that you can't really use the rear seats, but to be expected in a car like this. You can't use the seats in the 911 either. Lastly, I'm not a huge fan of the instrument cluster. It looks a little bit dated, and the graphics on the digital displays to the left and the right of it look like they're from a Game Boy Color. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to the driving experience because this thing's fantastic. All right, put it in first gear. Let's take off. All right, so block all of those negative things out of your head, reset, and let's get into the driving experience of the Evora 400 because that's what this thing is all about. So it's available with a 6-speed manual transmission or a 6-speed automatic. Being a Lotus, being that it is a fun to drive lightweight sports car, get the manual. Now, funny enough, the manual transmission is also made by Toyota, although the gear ratios are different for faster acceleration. The internals have also been beefed up by Lotus to handle the extra horsepower. The shifter itself feels absolutely fantastic. It's metal, the throws are perfect in length. When you shift it into gear, it slots so nicely, has this satisfying little bump to it. The clutch pedal is the perfect weight. Is an absolute joy to drive manual transmission. The pedals are nicely spaced for easy heel-toe downshifts. Actually, the pedals are all really close together. Makes it feel kind of more like a race car. Now, some performance statistics for you. With the manual transmission, the Evora 400 is able to sprint from 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 4.1 seconds. So it is properly fast. It also has a top speed of a pretty impressive 186 miles an hour. But what you notice more than the acceleration is just how balanced the chassis is and how the power comes on. We've got 3 different driving modes to choose from. There are buttons in the center console here, one labeled Sport and one labeled Race. Of course, then there's normal mode when you don't click either of the buttons. We'll go ahead and put it into Sport mode, which heightens throttle response, and it also makes the exhaust louder after about 4,000 RPMs. Sounds really nice when in sport mode. Now, if you want the car to be louder at all times, but you don't want that heightened throttle response, you can actually take it, put it back into normal mode, and there is an exhaust button to make it a little bit more exciting. This engine sounds fantastic. The fact that it is a Camry V6 has absolutely no relevance to the sound. It sounds almost like a combination of an E46 BMW M3's inline 6 and a 911's flat 6 with this little hint of supercharger whine. Let's give it some gas so you can hear it. Oh, that sounds awesome. Oh, unexpectedly good sound from this V6. It's nice and throaty. Oh, especially around the 4,000 to 5,000 RPM range. That is nice. Just the tiniest little hint of whine. Honestly, the power band is so linear. The power comes on so smoothly that if you didn't look at the engine, you didn't listen for that little whine, you'd be hard pressed to tell the car wasn't naturally aspirated. That's how nice the power delivery really feels. Now, 400 horsepower in today's day and age isn't actually all that much. 3,000 pounds is quite light, and the power to weight ratio for this chassis is honestly perfect. It doesn't need any more horsepower. It feels incredibly balanced. And honestly, it's more fun this way because you can be on the gas more often through the turns and really perfect your driving line than you can be in a 600, 700, 800 horsepower car that feels a little bit more out of control unless you truly are a professional driver. One of the biggest surprises I've had with the Lotus Evora is the suspension and how comfortable it rides. I expected it to be firm and stiff and have limited body roll and corner really well, but what I didn't expect is on this road that I drive every day that, to be honest, is relatively bumpy, and in a car like a GT3 RS or a GT2 RS, it almost feels like the suspension is too tight, like it's jarring. In this, it is unbelievably smooth. The only sports car that I've driven that has suspension that parallels this in terms of its ability to be smooth over bumps when you're just cruising and also have limited body roll and incredible performance, honestly, is the McLaren 720S. And given the fact this costs a little bit less than $100,000 and a 720S is well over $300,000, yeah, I think you're getting good value for the money there in terms of the suspension geometry. Then at higher speeds, it corners so unbelievably well. I'm a huge fan of the steering feel. It has the perfect weight to it, and combined with this really nice to hold steering wheel, it's an absolute riot to throw around the turns. And then you add in that manual transmission, and the driving experience of the Lotus is flippin' awesome. Oh man, this thing is fun. I like how manageable it all feels. It really is awesome, and the brakes on this are flippin' amazing. While the Evora is a very small car on the outside, once you're inside of it, it's actually pretty spacious. So we got plenty of headroom and shoulder room and leg room. You're not too close to your passenger. The visibility out of the front window is phenomenal. Out of the side windows, it's good as well. Out the back, it's relatively limited, but you're used to that in sports cars. But what I really love is the seating position. They absolutely nailed the seating position on the Evora. You can see right over the hood down to the road. The two haunches for the front wheels feel like sights, so you can place the car perfectly wherever you need it to be. And despite being really low down to the ground, I almost feel a little bit higher up in the car that gives me better visibility of the road. We still have an incredibly low center of gravity, but my visibility just feels improved. I'm not so low down in the cabin, and I don't have this really long dashboard and really long hood like you get in a Lamborghini Huracan, where it's almost a tiny bit intimidating. The road feels so far ahead of you, but in this, almost feels like a little go-kart. And having driven shifter carts yesterday, I know exactly what that feels like. Oh my gosh, this thing is a blast. And a tremendous amount of grip too, for being rear-wheel drive on Michelin Pilot Super Sports. Of course, we could have a bit more grip if we had Cup 2s, but it really doesn't need it. The amazing part about these cars is, because they're lightweight, because of the way they're designed, relatively easy on all of the car's components. You can take this to intense track days, and the brakes and tires are going to last you a lot longer than you're typically used to in a normal sports car. And because you have that Toyota powertrain, it's going to cost less if things break. But out on the road, this is phenomenally fun. This is like the perfect power level for this road. It really is. That sound is addicting. Oh my God. When you put it into race mode, traction control turns off. You've actually got to press and hold. Yeah, the level of grip, even with traction control off, is astounding. It's confidence inspiring to a whole nother level. Everything is so balanced, the steering is so tight, the brakes are so good, the throttle response is so predictable that it honestly makes you feel like an expert driver. And because it's not too fast, you can really start to actually push the car and explore the limits of it. Now, not to say it's slow in any way, it's absolutely exhilarating, but it's not so crazy that you're nervous to drive the car. It's just addicting. I literally don't want to get out of this thing. Put it back into sport mode. Whew. It actually gets exceptional fuel economy as well. This thing, as a press car, has been driven intensely, has averaged 18.7 miles per gallon. Yes, most sports cars can't do that. Honestly, my favorite part is just the smile it puts on my face. Oh man, I finally get it. I get it. 70 years ago when this company was founded, based on the principles of weight savings, man, they have developed awesome cars over time. And I think we'll be seeing more from Lotus in the near future because of some recent investments. So I am very, very excited about that after getting behind the wheel of this thing. Whew. So with that, I had an absolute blast with the Lotus Evora, one of the most fun cars I've driven in a while. I'm gonna leave you with a little point of view drive because that's what this thing is all about. Show you what it's like to drive first person. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next video.